I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head. Intercepted. 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Live on YouTube today, I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. It is draft week, my friend, and we are just a few short days away from the 2025 NFL Draft in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Today on the show, we have got a couple of mock drafts for you. Not just one, but two NFL mock drafts, one of them involving, of course, our beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But first and foremost, Evan, my friend, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. I mean, we're at this point when we are recording this, we're 48 hours away from the start of the NFL draft. So hard to believe it is upon us now. It's kind of snug up a little bit, but Thursday will be here before you know it, and the Buccaneers will be on the clock before we know it. So yeah, like you mentioned, we will have. I have a 3-round Bucs mock. Now I don't go through every pick of 3 rounds. I just choose, the Bucs' first 3 picks. I will say this is a predictive thing, kind of, not really necessarily what I would do. This is sort of what I lean towards. I think the Buccaneers would do, but at the same time, I can't predict rounds 2 and 3. So that's just kind of a guess of who would be available and this and that. And then also, I will do the top 10 of the regular draft as well later on in the show. So stay tuned for that. But and also, I will have. My full first-round mock draft I will have available on BucsNation.com. I believe Thursday morning it'll be available to read on BucsNation.com. So, yeah, but I mean, getting right into it, just a couple of notes first. There's been, a little bit of buzz, I guess you could say, right? Adam Schefter has an article out on ESPN and did not really anything specifically for Tampa Bay, right? Like doesn't really make like a full thing, but mentions the Buccaneers in 2 areas. One as a team who would maybe like to be looking to trade down in the first round, and also mentioned Rachaad White as a potential trade candidate. Obviously, the NFL draft does present an opportunity for GMs to potentially trade some players, right? I mean, I think you see every year there's maybe at least some player that's moved. I remember a couple years ago, DeAndre Swift got traded to Philly over draft weekend. There's been a couple of other things that have transpired, over draft weekends. So, excuse me. I definitely think that it's a possibility. I don't think the Bucs are going to be trading Rachaad White. I don't doubt that the Bucs have been getting calls on Rachaad White, but I mean, at that point, you're probably looking at some sort of day 3 pick, like a 5th or 6th round pick, and I think I'd rather just have Rachaad White on the team for another season. So I don't really foresee that. But the other one, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail. But the other one with the Bucs wanting to potentially trade down in the first round, now that's one that I could definitely see being a real possibility.
Now, let me get your opinion really quickly on this Rachaad White thing. And I guess I'm just kind of asking, a lot of people can see a report like this and obviously kind of shrug it off and say, oh, it's nothing. Jason Light isn't really getting calls about this. But somebody somewhere has a motive for getting that report out. So when you see stuff like this happen, not just with the Bucs, but in general, when a player's name is dropped in trade discussions before the draft, do you feel like that is an intentional sign, either from the agent or a player or some interested party who's kind of waving the flag and saying, hey, come get me? How do you feel about that situation? Do you think there's real traction there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think Schefter's putting it in there just to put it in there, right? I think it does make some logical sense. Rachaad White's going to be a free agent. I doubt Rachaad White returns in 2026. Obviously, anything can happen, but at this point, I would be surprised if he were back. He's going to be on the team this year, but as far as next year goes, I would be surprised. So the logical thinking would be, well, if the Buccaneers let's say they like a running back enough to pick one this year to pair with Bucky Irving, and they feel that they're going to lose Rashad White anyway, well, you might as well get a draft pick for him, right? Instead of getting nothing. So I think that's the logical thing. But I also like Schefter had to heard it from somewhere,
Yeah.
right? Whether it is an agent trying to drum up some interest or a potential team, right? An interested team. Maybe, he talked to some random team and they said, yeah, we called Tampa about White, the other day or whatever, and this and that, and maybe that'll be something that's tabled, during the draft, maybe that's where that's coming from, right? So I don't doubt that Schefter's heard that his name being floated out there, but I don't think he would have put his name. And it's not like he wrote a bunch of players,
Yeah.
right? He wrote maybe what 7 or 8 guys, and he was one of the guys. So I do think he's definitely heard it somewhere. And from a team building standpoint, it wouldn't be like, man, this makes zero sense. But at the same time, I think you would just probably rather have Rashad White for one more year. And if that is his last year with the team, so be it. But unless you're getting really good value, like unless you're getting a day 2 pick or even like a 4th round pick, maybe, I just don't really see the value in trading him, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Draft week is always exciting as well because, Evan, as you know, this is kind of our last gasp of football pageantry for months. And the NFL draft in itself has certainly become a must-see event. Over 12 million people last year tuned into the first round of the NFL draft. The first round is what people pay attention to. Today, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit, mock some guys into the second and third. But, really with the track history that Jason Light and the rest of this front office has, those middle rounds are very exciting. I think rounds 2 through 4, you could argue 5 if you really wanted to. That's the meat and potatoes for Jason Light and this crew. So I really am excited to see them go to work this week. And then on top of those rumors of, again, they're just rumors. He can deny this all he wants. But I mean, if there are legitimate discussions about the Buccaneers moving back, this seems like as good a year as any to do it. The Buccaneers only have 6 draft picks. I want to believe that if there's any year they could go back, this could be the year.
Yeah, and look, I think, we know Jason Light really likes his draft picks. At the same time, it takes 2 to tango, though,
Yeah.
right? And you have to have a team interested in moving up in order to move back.
And it's been reported there's a lack of that too.
Yeah, and because a lot of people think that, like, unless like if Shador Sanders is there at 19 and let's say a team really believes the Steelers at 21 there could potentially take him, well then maybe you could see a team moving up, right? But that's what would it be? Cleveland, maybe the Giants, maybe that's moving out of the first round altogether. So that would take a pretty good package of picks in order to move down that far, right? Like not only are you moving down 10 plus picks, you're also giving up the 5th-year option by moving out of the first round altogether. So you don't have that luxury. So I don't really know if the Bucs would want to move down that far, but I don't think they're going to be opposed. And I think Jason Light's phone is definitely going to be on. And also, like, when you say like, oh, well, there's been discussions, right? Obviously, they're not talking about deals right now. The discussions part of it is probably somebody, let's say it's the Texans, I believe 25, right? Let's say a Texan GM calls Jason Light and just says, or even Jason Light calls him and says, hey, if player X is here, would you have any interest in maybe moving up, right? Or are you guys staying pat? Are you guys looking to maybe move down yourselves? Or do you have any interest in moving up? That's where those just sort of getting a feel for it, right? So when you are on the clock, you can start fielding those calls and sort of have more of an idea. You're not going into it blind, basically. So I do believe, I think in an ideal world for the Buccaneers, I think they would like to trade down. I think they would like to acquire more picks. I don't think they want to trade down that far. I think they'd like to go as far as maybe like the mid 20s. That's why I sort of gave Houston there as an example of like 25th. I don't really think they want to move down much further than that. But again, all it takes is sort of one offer to change a mind, right? That's all it takes. So we'll see what happens there. I think they would like to. I think they'd like to get maybe another day two pick, and like you mentioned they only have six draft picks, so I'm sure they'd like to get that number up there. And we know how Jason Light feels about the draft, but again, if you're on the clock and your phone doesn't ring, well, then there's nothing you can do, right? You can't force a team to trade with you. So we'll see what happens, and you're not going to get that answer until the Buccaneers are on the clock at 19.
Let's go ahead and dive into today's mock draft, the first of two. Evan, we're going to, I think we're going to open up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers first 3-round mock, if I am correct, right?
Yeah, really quick
Yeah.
before we do though, I did want to bring up one more thing because look, smokescreen season is here, right? There's a lot of things being thrown out there. Um, and there's a lot of rumors, right, about oh, this player and this team and this team loves this guy and this team actually likes this guy and this and this. And yes, take a lot of it with a grain of salt, right? But there has been a decent amount of buzz surrounding the Buccaneers and Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston. Now Hairston, and this would be potentially at 19, which would feel very early for me. But I have heard a little bit that the Bucks do like Hairston a lot. So I mean, look, 6'1", 186, had a 67 PFF grade this year, had 81.8 PFF grade last year. He's a guy who can play a lot of man, got good recovery speed. I think he really got put on the map. I think he ran like a 4.28 40 at the combine. Really, really fast player. Like I said, that mixes in with that good recovery speed. Can play zone, can play man, efficient in both. I think he's better in man, but he could definitely play zone. We know the Buccaneers really like to play zone. I I like Hairston, but to me, if the Buccaneers are looking to draft a guy like that, that's where I think trading down would be um, a lot more logical, I guess you could say, a lot smarter.
Yeah.
And this is also a guy who has not played the slot really much at all, so you can't even, I wouldn't even really put him in the slot. So I think I had to mention it because there's been a lot of buzz specifically around him and the Buccaneers, and even more specifically around him and the Buccaneers, like the Buccaneers potentially picking him at 19, which to me um, would draw a lot of criticism from me for that. Not saying that he's a bad player. I just think there's much better players that you could probably take at 19th overall. So, like I said, just wanted to mention him. It may all be smoke, right? It may very well be smoke, but I think we'd be remiss if we did not mention him there. So, let's get right into it, though. This is, always very fun. And like I said, the first pick is more so a predictive one, right? Of like what I think will happen. Now, then the next two picks are, look, man, like I did a mock draft machine and these players were available in the day two, and these are who I took. Now, there's some players that were available where I was like, I don't think they'll be available, so I avoided them. Otherwise, I would have taken them. But let's get right into it. So, at the 19th overall pick, I have the Buccaneers selecting Donovan Ezeraku, edge defender from Boston College. I think there's a lot that connects Ezeraku to the Bucks. I think he's just their type of player. I think they want to add an edge rusher at some point in this draft. And to be honest with you, it's a good edge class, but I like the edges a lot more in round one than I do in round two, specifically when the Buccaneers were to be up again. I'm not really sold on a lot of the guys that like are in that middle second round kind of. So like if the Buccaneers weren't, if they were to pass on edge defender in round one, I don't know if I love any of the other options in rounds two or three. So I take Ezeraku here. He immediately comes in, and I'm probably not a starter, right? Which is fine, right? But again, with the Tampa Heat and everything, and the amount of pass rushers you need, you can never have enough. I just think him having in that rotation, and again with Hassan Reddick only signing a 1 year deal, You don't really know what the future of him is going to be. So, yeah, Diaby, you're hoping that he bounces back. But if he struggles again, I think you need to have a little bit of an insurance policy there. And this would be the highest pick, I believe, that the Buccaneers have ever taken an edge rusher in the Jason Light era. So, they haven't really invested in edge much in the first round at all, right? Joe Tryon-Schwenka, I believe, was the only true edge that they took in the first round. That was 32nd overall. So, I do believe this would be easily the highest pick that they've made there. And I think David Ezeraku, again, just makes a lot of sense. And I think he's the type of player and person I think that they like to target.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, especially with Ezeraku here. You can't go wrong with the trenches. I know that they're probably going to build on the defense. I don't think it's really a secret that the Buccaneers are going to have a heavy defensive side of the draft. But I think Ezeraku at 19, when you look at this crop of pass rushers, like you said, if you pass on an edge rusher in the first round, I know that there is a lot of solid talent in the second and third rounds. You kind of look at picks 10 through 50, and you can interchange those guys whichever way you want. It's a decent draft. You can't have enough pass rushers. And you talked about the shortcomings of this Buccaneers defense in the past. Even the shortcomings of this secondary, I think that can be fixed with a proper pass rush.
It could help it. Yeah.
One of the things that Todd Bowles has been hampering on these last several years is getting pressure on the quarterback with 4 down linemen. You can't do it with less edge rushers on your roster. I think that Hassan Reddick is going to take you as far as he's going to take you. I'm excited to see how that develops. I really hope that he has a future as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. I was asking some of my coworkers today. I don't see a scenario where he's here longer than a year. Some people disagree, but I would like to see him remain a Buccaneer. But even if he doesn't, to have a roster of dogs, to have a Donovan Ezeraku on your roster without Hassan Reddick, I mean, you got to see how this kid shakes out, obviously. But I'm all for it. I'm all for taking an edge rusher. I'm really all for any defensive position here. Linebacker, depending on who it is, feels like it'd be, I think there are better picks at 19 than a linebacker. An edge rusher is without a doubt one of them. I like the pick a lot. Ezeraku is towards the top of my board, personally.
Yeah, so like I said, I think it makes a lot of sense. So with that, in the second round, pick 53 overall, I am actually taking a position that you had just mentioned a little bit. I am taking a linebacker. And there's a couple of, I guess, we talked about this on the draft preview that we talked about the defensive side of the ball, and you can go check that out if you guys missed it. But we talked about a lot of the day 2 linebackers, right? There's multiple guys here that I think could be intriguing. I went with Demetrius Knight Jr. out of South Carolina. Now, I do like a guy like UCLA's Carson Schwarzenegger. That was a case where I just don't think Carson Schwarzenegger is going to be available for the Buccaneers. And it was probably a little bit early for a guy like Chris Paul Jr. So Demetrius Knight Jr. It is 6'2", 245. The downfall to Demetrius Knight Jr. is he is 25. So that is old for a rookie, right? So he's gonna be 25 years old. Now, I mean, if you want to look at the positives, well, he has experience, right? He's a mature player. If you want to look at the positives, had two straight really solid years for South Carolina there. At a run defense grade of 85.4, had a pass coverage grade of 74.9. I know that's something that's a lot of people is going to pay attention to. And I think when you combine that size, 6'2", 245, with the coverage grade, I think it looks pretty good. So I like him in there in the second round to be the starter next to Lavonte David. Despite him being 25, I still like him enough, and I make him the pick there at 53 overall.
Well, and interestingly enough, he is the only inside linebacker the Buccaneers have had at the facility for a top 30 visit. So, I mean, they have got a plethora of guys who have come in, a lot of wide receivers, 3 wide receivers, 3 defensive tackles, 3 outside linebackers, 1 inside linebacker being Demetrius Knight Jr., 17 and a half cornerbacks, and 1 safety being J.J. Roberts out of Marshall. I also like the pick. Again, in the first round, if a Jahad Campbell is there at 19 and you don't necessarily have the edge rusher you like, then I can understand taking a linebacker at number 19. But I do feel like there are more pressing needs in that first round. Here in the second, Demetrius Knight Jr., yes, he is 25, but he's a solid prospect, and he ultimately fits a need. He may not be starting this year. He may not be getting a ton of reps in 2025 if Anthony Walker is able to stay healthy and Servassier Dennis is able to do his thing, because he's been touted to be good as well. But as you mentioned, Levante David isn't going to play forever, and eventually you're going to need more guys in that unit who can step up. It wouldn't be a bad time to take a look at linebacker there. I do like that pick. Again, more defense.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I think there is a decent chance he's a starter from day one.
Yeah?
I view Anthony Walker. I just view Anthony Walker as slightly better than KJ Britt. Um, Not a guy you probably want as your starter. Servassier Dennis, I like him, but like I feel like we would have seen a little bit more flashes if there was something there. Now I understand that
A lot of
injuries have
people
been a concern. I get it. But yeah, sure, but like that I don't know. It's just to
a
me
lot of
like
people seem to
the
like
team
Servassier Dennis.
the team seems to be higher on him than I am. So
That's how
I
I felt about Zion McCollum a couple of years ago. So you never know what could happen.
yeah, you never know for sure. And I mean, look, if Servatia Dennis ends up turning out well, and they draft a guy like Demetrius Knight, well, I suspect this is probably Levante David's last year in the NFL. Well, then the Buccaneers have their answer at linebacker next year, right, with those two guys. So they wouldn't have to really go searching for one. Wouldn't be a bad problem to have. Um, the other thing is, when you mentioned the Jahad Campbell thing versus like the, edge rusher, when I mentioned about the edge rushers that I don't love on day two as much, yeah, like linebacker, Jahad Campbell could be available at 19, but I like the options for linebacker on day two,
Yeah.
like much more than I would edge. So I would still lean edge if there were guys available, which I would imagine there's probably going to be at least one that is available there. So we will see what ends up happening. But then in the third round, the final pick that I'm projecting for the Buccaneers, because once you get past this, I mean, really, the draft's a crapshoot anyway, but once you get past this, it really becomes a crapshoot. But I am taking Noel Williams, a cornerback from the University of California. I mean, a guy with a pretty good size profile. I think he's a guy who makes a lot of sense. Seeing here, he is 6'1", 200 pounds. Played pretty well for Carolina, University of California. Okay, and he was a pretty good player for them. So I think it makes sense. I do expect the Buccaneers, and I know, look, people want the Bucs to draft a corner. It seems like every year they want them to draft it right, like first, right? And I get it. But I do expect the Bucs to add a corner at some point. And this is a pretty early pick in a corner, right? But Noah Williams had like a pretty consistent like college career, and it was pretty solid. But this past year, and I know interceptions are not the end all be all, and I don't really base on that. But the dude did have seven last year, so like. I mean, there is something to be said for seven interceptions there. Had a 78.2 coverage grade, 78.7 run defense grade. Now, he did most of the time play on the outside, but at the same time, you're taking him in the third round, right? So even if he's not a surefire starter in year one, it's okay. So he's probably not going to be a guy that's going to play the slot for you. So I mean, I would be comfortable enough, and especially at this spot in the third round, he has higher zone coverage grades than man, which we know. Like I think, the Buccaneers still play a lot more zone than man coverage. And I think he's a pretty good fit. So I ended up going with a corner there to fill that role. And so just to recap it really fast, round one, pick 19, Don Ezraku, edge rusher from Boston College. Round two, pick 53, Demetrius Knight Jr., linebacker from South Carolina. And round three, 84th overall, cornerback Noel Williams from California. So obviously, addressing all three picks are on the defense side of the ball, which shouldn't really be a surprise.
Noel Williams, another guy on this list here who's had a top 30 visit with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers already. He is one of these
Did
several.
did Ezraku have one or no?
No, he did not.
Okay.
The outside linebackers they have talked to are Mikael Williams from Georgia, Femi Oladijo, I think I said that incorrectly, from UCLA, and Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. And then I guess I can just read the rest of them off. Defensive tackle Darius Alexander from Toledo. Defensive tackle Shamar Turner from Texas A&M. Defensive tackle Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. And the wide receivers, Matthew Golden, Texas. Jalen Noel, Iowa State. And Alec Iomanner from Stanford. How many times have you said that one correctly? I had that one. I had it written down right in front of me here, my friend. But going back really quickly to that last pick, Noel Williams, one of the things that I like most about this guy, and I'm pretty sure you mentioned this, but it's just his hands. Led the country with 7 interceptions last season. And I think with a Buccaneers secondary especially, that has been starving for interceptions. It can't hurt to have a guy with that kind of ball production back there. Now, again, you
That's,
have to
I
see.
believe that isn't that the number of interceptions that the Buccaneers had last year?
Probably.
I'm pretty sure it's 7.
Yeah, I know they definitely went 7 straight games without an interception before Tyke Smith was able to end the drought. But I don't think you can have enough of those guys in the backfield. And obviously, you got to see how it translates to the NFL. But for a 3rd-round pick, it's not too shabby, my friend. Good 2nd or 3rd corner depth. And as we have said on this show before, you cannot have enough good corner depth.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
I like it a lot.
The Buccaneers had 7 interceptions in 2024. So they had total as a team what Noel Williams had in a year. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean Noel Williams is going to come in and they're all of a sudden going to be top 5 in interceptions. But he is clearly has a knack for finding the football, and I think he could only help. Now, Brutal as Buck says, Mike Green, anybody? I like Mike Green. He's probably my 2nd edge defender behind Abdul Carter. I don't think the Buccaneers would take Mike Green because there is some off the field things with him, and I just not really seems like the player they typically take. So I like him. I would take him, but I don't think the Bucs would. I'm also not convinced that 100% he's there for the Bucs in 19. And also like and this is for Noel Williams and Demetrius Knight Jr. Obviously, the Bucs had top 30 visits. Doesn't mean the Bucs are going to take him, right? Because it also doesn't mean the Bucs aren't going to take anybody that they didn't have a top 30 visit with. They didn't speak to Kalijah Kancey at the combine, and they did not have a top 30 visit with him at the facility, and he still picked them 19th overall in 2023. So that just goes to show you that yes, it's a baseline, but it's not the end all be all, right? And if you like a guy enough, that doesn't really matter. So, so I obviously addressing a lot from the defensive side of the ball, which again the Buccaneers should, and I'd be pretty surprised if they didn't prioritize that. So shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that my 3 picks, for first 3 picks of the draft there are on the defensive side of the ball.
Now, before we get into our top 10 mock, just kind of weighing some of the other options or at least positions on the table for Tampa Bay. I know that we are both expecting a heavy dose of defense here over the first 3 rounds in your mock. You've got all defense, but do you see a scenario where they take a wide receiver, a tight end? I don't want to say running back just because of the Rachaad White stuff, but I mean, is there a chance they take an offensive player or something you may not expect? Let's say there's a can't miss guy right there at 19 and you like him much better than any defensive prospect left. What kind of situation do they find themselves in?
That's a tough situation, right?
Yeah.
If they have a wide receiver, let's say,
Let's say
and then
Matthew Golden.
and then the next available defensive player is 10 spots lower, right, than Matthew Golden is. That's a tough one, right? Because you're talking about, well, that's the best player on your board versus, well, now you're starting to reach for a need, right? So I still don't expect. Still don't think it's likely that they take a wide receiver. I think of the offensive positions. I think if they were to take any offensive position in the first 3 rounds, I think it is a wide receiver. But I still don't quite expect that, and I'd be pretty surprised if that were the case. So, no, I'm not expecting it. I really don't expect a tight end. I think, like I said, I think they want to get an extension done with Kate Otten sooner rather than later. And unless they're moving Rashad White, which again I still think is unlikely, I wouldn't really expect a running back either. But hey, again, all it takes is one team to really like Rashad White and offer you something that you're like, man, just kind of can't pass up on this. And then one with him out of the equation, running back could be looking completely different then. And like in the fourth round, maybe you do take one if you like one enough.
I still get a funny feeling in the pit of my stomach about the Buccaneers trading out of the first round. We got to see what happens, but I think part of it is because Thursday night I'm gonna be helping work the event out at the Buccaneers draft party at Raymond James Stadium. There's gonna be 10,000 screaming Buccaneer fans there, ready for the first round of the draft. And wouldn't that be the most Tampa Bay thing in the history of the world?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, in the 11th hour. And the best part is, a lot of people aren't allowed to leave until after the draft is over. So regardless of if the Bucs pick at 19 or not, it could be a late night for a lot of people. But I don't know.
I mean, the Buccaneers have done that. They did it.
Yeah.
3 years ago? They did in 2022. They traded out of the first round completely. I Bleav they were 27th overall, I think, or something like that, and they traded out of the first round. So it can happen. Like, it definitely can happen. I think with them being at 19 this year, I think it's a little less likely because that is a long way to drop. Like
Yeah,
that is
and
far to drop, but it could happen.
Yeah, I think you got to see a nice return. I don't think one extra pick is going to move them out of 19, but if you can turn 6 picks into 8.
I don't even know if two. I mean, you're talking 13 spots and the loss of a fifth-year option. Like any player you have on the top of your board there at 19 is likely not going to be available when it's your turn to pick at 33 or 34. So, like, I would be asking for, obviously, I'm getting their second. I'd get the third. I'd ask for probably a day 3 pick, and then I'd probably ask for a day 2 pick next year.
Yeah,
Especially with that, if you're trading up, it's either Cleveland or New York, and that means they're trading up for a quarterback. So that price needs to be a little bit extra too.
I agree. Evan, let's get into our top 10 mock here for the NFL draft. And the top 10 is always a lot of fun. The top of the first round is always such a spectacle in itself. It's become must-see television in terms of the people who flock to watch this thing and the NFL rolling out the red
to watch
carpet.
names being read.
But I think one of the most fun parts of the draft is there's always a team in the top 10 that kind of messes it up for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You get through those first 3 or 4 or 5 picks and everything's going according to plan, and then all of a sudden Atlanta takes Michael Penix and everything is flipped on its head. I am curious to see if you have any of those picks. I personally think the Giants at 3 could be a catalyst here, and I'm curious to see your opinion on what position they go with here. But I am excited to hear your top 10, my friend. Let's get to it.
Yeah, so number one overall, and again, this is what I think. I don't love mock drafts when they're like, oh, this is what I would do. Like I don't like it's a fun exercise, but I don't like that like publishing your mock drafts. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this is what I would do. I like to try and be as right as possible. And again, this will be my top 10. My full first round mock draft will be available on BucsNation.com Thursday morning. But number one overall, Titans, Cam Ward. I mean, I'm not even gonna spend time on it. That's pretty much the obvious pick there. Whether you think Cam Ward should be the first overall pick or not, he's going to be. So that's just the reality.
That would be probably a bigger shock than anything else that can happen in the top 10. If Cam Ward does not end up with the Titans, you got to beg the question, what went wrong here?
Yeah. Number two, Cleveland, and this is where sort of the debate can begin, right? Because basically it's a two-player debate. Some people think it's a three-player debate. I have the Browns taking Travis Hunter. I think, and the three players would be Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Shador Sanders. It's all been smoke about Shador and stuff and everything, and he actually goes two. I'm not really buying it. So I just think Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter might be the best player in this draft. So I think Cleveland being fortunate that Tennessee needs a QB that badly, I think they need to take advantage of that and just stock up on blue chip talent. So
Yeah.
I think Travis Hunter makes sense. I think he plays more cornerback in the NFL, but we'll have to wait and see. And then the Giants at three. Um, and I do have the Giants taking Abdul Carter. I don't think with them adding before they added Russell Wilson and James Winston, like I did fully expect them to take Shedeur Sanders. Like I didn't really think the Browns were going to. I thought the Giants would be the spot. Now that they signed not one but two quarterbacks, I have a tough time thinking that they're gonna take Shedeur as well. Not with a top three pick and not with a guy like Abdul Carter who, could make the case. Like I mentioned Travis Hunter, like Abdul Carter's right there, I think, right, for like best player in this class. So if you're able to get the potential best player in this class at number three overall, I think you have to do it. And like that pass rush and defensive line with, Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. I know there's been some talk about them potentially trading Thibodeau, but and Dexter Lawrence, like it's pretty lethal there. That could be a pretty big strength of their team.
I think that is the correct move.
I'm
I
I'm,
think
I'm
it's
curious to see what did you think
well.
was
I
gonna
wanted to see
happen there,
what you ended up
or
doing
could happen,
here.
I should say.
Well, Shador, obviously.
Okay.
I still think
Okay.
that there is a whatever chance that they could just say F it and take
Oh,
Shador
for sure.
Sanders.
I don't think
the
it's I don't think it's zero. Yeah.
Yeah, the responsible thing to do, the correct pick would be an Abdul Carter or just another blue chip player. Oh God, what's the name of that offensive lineman from?
Will Campbell.
Yeah, maybe Will Campbell. He's there. There's a couple of guys that could obviously be on their radar, but I think the coaching staff and the situation that they find themselves in have a lot to do with not wanting to take a risk on Shedeur Sanders, because obviously that's a risk. Any first-round quarterback is a huge risk. If you take Shedeur Sanders and you win 4 or 5 games with a rookie quarterback, you're getting fired either way. So I think that there is a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily forgiveness or tolerance, but you can get away, in my opinion, I feel like in the year of our Lord 2025, with the quarterback Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, I feel like you can get away with 6 to 8 wins and keep your job. I don't know if that happens with a first-round rookie. I know that kind of sounds backwards, but I feel like you pay attention to how you build the team there. And honestly, this year's crop of quarterbacks, outside of Cam Ward,
And
a lot of
even
experimental
Ward,
guys.
like Cam Ward would be considered like QB 4 or 5 last year.
That I heard
Like,
someone say QB8.
yeah, I mean, maybe it all depends on what your type of flavor is a quarterback. Some people. I mean, you would have what Caleb, Jaden Daniels,
Drake May.
Drake May. I would have Michael Penix Jr. above Cam Ward.
You already say
Um,
Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, I would have probably had Bo Nix above Cam Ward. The conversation for me would have been Cam Ward versus JJ McCarthy. That would have been the conversation for me of like who's QB 6,
Yeah.
right? Like that's what it would be for me. So yeah, I mean, I just think the Giants need to add talent, right? And I think Abdul Carter makes sense. So the Patriots at 4, I have them selecting Will Campbell. They need to upgrade the offensive line and protect Drake May as best as possible. They obviously have a huge investment in him, and they need to make sure they do whatever they can in order to make sure he stays upright. Another team that just they added a lot in free agency, but they still just need talent. Number 5, Jacksonville. They could go a couple different ways. I still have Mason Graham, the defensive lineman from Michigan. I think Jacksonville probably focus on the defensive side of the ball. Right in the early in the process, I thought maybe a guy like Ted McMillan could be here, but I sort of doubt it now. Mason Graham still feels like a pretty decent bet there. Number 6, Las Vegas. Pete Carroll's going to win this argument, and I think they're going to take Ashton Genty. Um, I mean, look, it's not terrible, especially with Vegas getting Geno Smith. Hopefully filling their QB need, right, so they don't have to reach for a guy like Shador, or potentially trade up for Shador. So I mean that helps, but Yeah, John Spytek's first pick, I believe, with the Raiders is going to be Ashton Genty. Just, it's just my opinion. He's a good player. I think he's going to do a lot for that offense, but running back at sixth overall is always a little cringe to me.
I still think outside of that, though, if you're a Raiders fan right now, it's hard to not feel a little bit smug. Just because I think on the outside looking in, it's hard to deny that the Raiders aren't going to look, I don't want to say a lot better, but noticeably,
No, but I mean, they
noticeably
could be
better
they could be
in like
they
two,
could, they
3
could be a little
years.
frisky. Yeah, they could be
Yeah.
they could be a team where it's like, all right, well, not an automatic W on the schedule,
Yeah.
like
Well,
they could be a
tough.
team that wins, I don't
Yeah.
know, 7, 8 games. I think Pete Carroll's still a good coach. So
Yeah, no, I do too, and I think between John Spytek and Tom Brady apparently running the show in the front office over there, that's a team built for success. At least they have the right people doing the job. So you just got to see if they can put the pieces together. Still a little bit of building to do with that roster, but they have talent. They got their stopgap quarterback in Geno Smith. We'll see what happens 2-3 years from now, but I do think that they are a team. It's hard to argue against them, doing things the right way for the first time in a very long time.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see what happens there, and they can go a couple of different directions as well. But the Jets at number 7. Another team that can go in a couple of different directions. I have them selecting Missouri tackle Armand Membu. I just think their tackle situation has been brutal for the past couple of years, and I just think they need to figure out a way to fill it, give Justin Fields the best chance possible to succeed. So I think he's the top tackle left on the board after Will Campbell, and I think they need to basically select him. Number 8, Carolina. I have them selecting Jalen Walker, linebacker slash edge. Kind of. There's some thought that maybe he could play that. I think there's people who are really high on him. There's people who aren't really high on him. I sort of fall in line with the people who aren't as high on Jalen Walker. But I can see where the appeal is, and I think Carolina is a team that needs just talent on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Sort of in all areas there. And I think it makes sense whether he's at edge, whether he's at that inside linebacker. I think it makes sense. So I have the Panthers selecting him.
I mean, you might need 2 or 3 edge rushers to fill the hole that a guy like Brian Burns leaves behind. So a sensible pick there for Carolina.
And number 9 overall, the Saints, who I was doing some.
They're gonna do
I
it.
don't know. I
They're
was doing
gonna do
some
it.
research on New Orleans, and I believe this is the first time since 2008 that they've had a top 10 pick. And
Wow.
they haven't had a top 5 pick since like the 80s. I think it was like 1981 or something. 1982 was the last time they had a top 5 pick. So yeah, pretty crazy. I have them selecting Ted McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. I do not think they're selecting Shador Sanders
Why not?
because to me, the Derek Carr news didn't just come out of nowhere. Like they knew about it, and nobody was really connecting them to Shador until the Carr news came out.
Yeah.
Like I think they're like, oh, Derek Carr's gonna miss. Obviously, they'll just take Shador Sanders. I think I think they sort of see it as an opportunity to what like they should do of like maybe you bottom out and win 3 or 4 games and get a top 5 pick and pick your quarterback next year where it could be a little bit of a better class. Um, so I don't think again I'm not doubting it. I don't think it's a 0% chance that they take Shador. I just don't
You're
see
just
it, and I think the buzz really started to begin when Derek Carr's the whole thing with his shoulder and
yeah.
stuff. But the issue was the Saints obviously already knew about that. Like the Saints had known about, yeah, the media didn't know, but like the Saints knew. So like they've been operating under this assumption that they probably might not have Derek Carr for 2025, and you still didn't hear much until it was announced that Carr was most likely going to be out. So I still think they pass on Shador.
Well, you've always been an independent thinker. You're not buying into the hype, and I gotta commend you for it because you stay true to the game, my friend. I think it makes a lot of sense for them to pull the trigger on Shador Sanders. Now, part of me is eager because if Shador is a flop, some people think he may be. Some people think he'll have a mediocre 3-4 year career and then be relegated to a backup for the rest of his days. I'd love to see it happen in New Orleans. I'm not going to lie to you. I am I'm curious just your take on Shador Sanders in general before we get to this final pick here of the top 10 mock. Um, I am very torn. I think that there's just a lot of things that prove he is not pro ready. I think he's a fine quarterback. I think he has good tendencies. I think it's clear that, he can walk or he can talk the talk. He can put the work in. He can train with Tom Brady, and they put those videos on social media and all of that. But I don't know. There is a bit of hesitancy there when it comes to, I guess, thinking about the long-term career he's going to have. What kind of player, what kind of QB do you think Shador Sanders is going to be in the NFL? You think he's ready?
To me, the best version of Shador Sanders is probably like, and this isn't a knock, right? Because this guy was a good quarterback and won games. Probably like an Alex Smith. That's if everything goes well for Shador,
Yeah.
I think he's probably like Alex Smith, which like, dude, like Alex Smith was a good quarterback. Like he wasn't a bad quarterback.
Won
He won,
games.
like
He
I
was
said,
a
he's
franchise
won
guy.
games. Yeah, I mean, he's won games. Um,
I
do I think
heard.
do I think Shador's going to get there? Well, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, I think it was Albert Breer who put out his quarterback comparisons. It may have been today. He may have been done a big article that came out today. But one of the comparisons I had heard was Teddy Two Gloves.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think Bridgewater was a bit more accurate, and I think Shador might have a little bit better escapability. But obviously, I think Shador's a smart player.
Yeah.
I think he's gonna have an NFL career. Like I don't think this is gonna be a guy who's gonna flop and then just be out of the league. I think if doesn't do well as a starter, I think he's gonna be a backup somewhere.
End
Like
up
I
like
said, I
Josh
think he's a
Johnson.
smart player. He's a one of one. I don't think anybody else is gonna be like Josh
He
Johnson.
truly is.
But
He's still going too.
um,
I'm so happy he's going to be back.
yeah, still going back in Washington.
Buccaneers
Yeah.
legend Josh Johnson.
Actually, I'm kind of mad that he went back to a team he was already on. Like I
Yeah.
want you to go to a different team. Like continue the Rolodex, you know.
I would
Um,
love one of these
but I
days.
just
It may never happen. I guess it would have to be a 32-year career, but it'd be pretty hilarious to have a player some way, somehow, have a tenure with all 32 teams. Sorry, I'm starting to lose it a little bit. I'm getting tired. You go ahead.
well, I mean, you could be on multiple teams. You could be on multiple teams in a year.
You
I
could.
mean, that could
But
happen.
how often is
I
that
think
guy
Josh
going
Johnson
to
was.
How often is that guy going to continue to get a
Yeah,
chance?
yeah.
I mean, Josh Johnson's the exception.
Right,
He's halfway
right.
there.
They should just continue. They should just continue it for the bit.
Yeah.
It's like the 31st team. It's like the 32nd team. It's like the Colts. They're like, well, we don't want to sign him, but we kind of have to. You know, just because if we do, then he's played on every team. You know,
Making history.
yeah. So be a part of history, or burn history to the ground. But I think that Shador. I mean, the arm strength is okay. I don't mind the mobility. It's not great. Like I don't think he's gonna be beating anybody with his legs. But I think the escapability is decent enough. And I do think there is something to be said about having like a little bit of an it factor, right? So I do like that, but I like I said, my absolute highest ceiling for him is Alex Smith, who I think is a good quarterback, but not a great one. So I don't really know. I think like high end Alex Smith, maybe he ends up like an Andy Dalton, or like Dalton had a few solid years as a starter.
Yeah.
You know, went to the playoffs a couple of times, but now's like a backup. I could see his career kind of going like that. So I'm not the biggest Shador Sanders fan.
On a smaller scale, maybe a Jameis Winston. I don't know. I don't think he's as explosive.
No, yeah, play style differently.
Yeah.
But maybe like career wise, like career path, maybe.
Give him 5
but,
solid
like,
years as
play
a
style
starter.
wise. Yeah, and then you're a backup where you can come in a pinch, but yeah, that's what I see. And like I said, I don't love Cam Ward anyway, you know, but like I like Cam Ward a good bit more than Shador. I think Cam Ward has a higher ceiling than him. So yeah, I think that's my thoughts on Shador Sanders there. And with potentially Arch Manning coming out next year, a couple other quarterbacks, Drew Aller from Penn State maybe coming out next year. I just have I would prefer if I have a team that needs a quarterback, or maybe it could you could wait a year. I would prefer to wait the year, rather than take Shador. But I understand some teams aren't in that position, right? Some teams and franchises simply can't afford that. So with that being said, let's finish up the top 10 here with the Chicago Bears. And I have the Bears taken. This could be a couple of different things because they filled a lot of their needs, but I have them continuing along the offensive line, trying to shore that up completely with Kelvin Banks Jr., a tackle from Texas. Try to protect Caleb Williams the best you can, right? They added a bunch of offensive linemen this offseason, but I think they have to get it right with Caleb Williams, or else this franchise is going to be set back multiple years. And I think Caleb Williams is all talent in the world,
Yeah.
and I just think you need to have the right pieces around him. Last year, it's clear that wasn't. Now this year with Ben Johnson as head coach, I think protecting Caleb Williams has to be top priority, and it has been for the Bears this offseason, and I think it's going to continue into the draft. They could also take an edge rusher here, but I lean towards no. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, that is my top 10. So number one, Cam Ward to the Titans. Number two, Travis Hunter to the Browns. Number three, Abdul Carter to the Giants. The Patriots select Will Campbell. Jaguars select Mason Graham. Raiders select Ashton Genty. Jets Armand Membu. Panthers Jalen Walker. Saints Ted McMillan. And Bears Cullen Banks Jr. And obviously, like I revealed, the Buccaneers I have selecting Diamond Ezeracco at 19. If you want to see the full first round mock, head over to BucsNation.com on Thursday morning. My full first round mock draft will be out with all 32 picks.
Just for fun here, who's the next quarterback off of the board for you? Because you've only got two. Or one.
Well, I only have one. I don't have Shador going.
I was going to say, you've only got one going in the top 10. So is Shador your QB2, and where do you think he ends up? Or who is your QB2?
Yeah, I do have Shador going in the first round. I don't think he drops out of the first round. I am going to the Steelers at 21. I think that's probably, and I didn't do trades in this mock draft, so I think maybe there could be a possibility of a team trying to trade up. Who knows? But I think Pittsburgh at 21, that makes some sense. So that's where I had him going. And yeah, like I said, you have to see, do I have any other quarterbacks in the first round? Maybe, you'll have to see. Jackson Dart, maybe. Jalen Milroe, maybe. It's a couple, obviously, like I said, the Browns and Giants still did not take quarterbacks in my mock. So, we'll have to wait and see, how it all shakes out. But like I said, you guys can go and read the full first round mock when it releases on BucsNation.com Thursday morning. Really looking forward to it releasing.
Absolutely. With that all being said, I think that's just about going to do it for tonight's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I want to thank
next time we talk to you, we'll have a lot of answers.
Yeah, we will. Next time we talk to you, we will be breaking down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2025 draft class. It is draft week, Thursday through Saturday. Probably Sunday we'll talk to you. I think if we're just, shooting from the hip here, we'll figure it out and iron out the details as we move along. But really quickly, want to recognize everyone in the live chat here on YouTube. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us live. Willie Beeman, the moderator, holding it down. Brutal as Bucs. MK, Mikey Kelly, Richard T from the West Coast. Glenn Haight. I hope I said that correctly. Sorry about your last name, my friend. And go Bucs 19 and 11. Anybody else that I may have missed, we truly appreciate you stopping by. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Cannon Fire Podcast. Yeah.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Yeah, I'm Ron Burgundy. I'm Tony Gonzalez. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host, Evan, on Instagram at Bucs_daily. And find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. Check out his written work at BucsNation.com. As you just heard from the man, Thursday morning, bright and early, you can check out his full first-round mock draft. You'll be able to see the players that we covered here today, and then some of the guys that we did not have time for. But great work by Evan over there, as always. Last but not least, you can find myself on Instagram and Twitter at Redickus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And please check out my new project, Video Americana. All one word, Video Americana. We are doing a lot of fun stuff. We are ironing out the final details and edits and all of that good stuff on our feature on Mel's Hot Dogs, which I don't know how familiar you are with a good Chicago dog, but they are kind of hard to find down here in Tampa. Mel's has been doing it for over 50 years, and they do it damn well. So very excited for that one to drop. And next time you're down here, Evan, we should actually probably go by Mel's. You'd like it a lot. Yeah. Thank you guys once again for hanging out with us today. I am your host, Rhett Matthews, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will talk to you later on after the draft. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.